Financiamento e gestão econômica é o tema do segundo episódio da temporada Museus. Será que quando o assunto é orçamento, a situação dos museus em Londres, Antuérpia, Salvador e Bruxelas é diferente? Série Gestão Cultural Mundo Afora. Mais uma troca de ideias sobre métodos e estratégias de gestão cultural está começando. França, Inglaterra, Estados Unidos, Cuba, Canadá, Brasil. Olá, eu sou Daniele Canedo e esses livros fazem parte da minha coleção pessoal de guias e catálogos de museus mundo afora. Você sabia que a venda desses produtos e até mesmo do cafezinho representam cerca de 60% da renda adquirida por museus públicos e privados ao redor do mundo? Nesse episódio da temporada Museus da série Gestão Cultural Mundo Afora, nós falaremos sobre gestão econômica e financiamento. Confira!
O Museu de Arte Moderna da Bahia é um museu público vinculado à Secretaria de Cultura, através do IPAC, que é o Instituto do Patrimônio Artístico e Cultural. E estamos em transição para o IBAM, que é o Instituto Baiano de Museus, que deverá ser criado ainda esse ano, que vai dialogar diretamente com o IBRAM.
It's a city museum, so the city is a proprietor. The city pays my salary, for example, and the city paid about 20 million euros to create this museum, and 21 million euros came from the community of Flanders.
The museum is a public administration. It's the federal state. It's a ministry. The name of the ministry is the Belgian Science Policy, and we are a department of the Belgian Science Policy. We are no more in the cultural domain because the culture are in the community, but we are research, scientific research with a collection, and the connection between the research and the collection explain why we are still federal institution today.
Normalmente, fazemos com um ano de antecedência essa previsão orçamentária para ser enviada, obviamente, ao IPAC, que vai, por sua vez, enviar a Secult, tem que também haver essa análise por parte da Secretaria da Fazenda, né? Tem todo esse processo, por isso essa antecedência.
We are required to prepare budgets over a 3-year period, so that's the financial planning requirements from the government department that sponsors us. So we are provided with a settlement of how much our grant will be each year in 3 or 4 year blocks, and we are able then to budget based on those allocations and then based on some of the other significant changes, such as the exhibitions that we've got planned that might bring in different amounts of income in different years, and also significant areas of expenditure such as capital projects, that sort of thing. So we will plan over a sort of rolling 3-year period in order to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the building and the gallery, and also scheduling in programs that are bringing in sufficient income to meet our operating expenditure.
We make plans for a period of 5 years, yes, surely, because we are working with a mandate of 6 years, so we are obliged to propose a program to the ministry for 5 years. But a lot of things are changing during this time. We just take a look on the crisis and the situation of Greece and Spain. Since about 5 years ago, it was impossible to think that the euro will be in such a crisis. So it's always difficult to manage a long-term plan. It's also really difficult because the politics is no more involved with long-term. Politics are always concerned with elections and polls, so they have to find a really short-term solution. For us, the long-term is more how to spread the collection and how to manage the collection with new museological unity and new projects like the Magritte Museum, the Financiamento Museum, and then the Art Nouveau Museum, and then this and this and this, and how to manage that and to promote it. That's the long term for us. and we are more and more on the short term. The way to answer to this problem is more to think about the place of the museum in the city, the place of the museum in the society, and how to manage with the collection new entities to promote the museum and to increase the benefits of the museum.
A única verba, né, que nós temos para o funcionamento do Museu de Arte Moderna da Bahia é a verba pública, por enquanto. E o que nós temos feito aqui no museu é a busca de financiamentos externos. Não só aqui no Brasil, como também o financiamento de fundações e instituições estrangeiras. Concorremos também a editais para a aquisição de equipamentos para o museu, editais públicos que são oferecidos, né, que são disponibilizados ao público através do MINC, da Funarte e outras instituições também privadas.
In terms of the financing, we have two stories. The first story is about how we can find companies, private persons to invest in the building, in the stones. We built a new museum and that needs to be financed. So the founders, the major sponsors, individuals, the hands, for example, all this money goes to the creation, the building of this museum. And then apart from that, we have sponsorships from smaller companies, but also from public authorities, because they give us the possibility to regain money. We have a budget of about 2.5 million, 3 million euros to create exhibitions, to pay the salaries every year, and that comes mostly from the public authorities. It's a good, interesting mix between private sponsorship and public authorities in terms of the government and the community of Flanders on one side, on the other side the city of Antwerp.
Our government grant represents about 75% of our total incoming resources, so we rely on other means of generating income, and one of those means is through raising charitable income and through sponsorship and relationships with corporate partners and donors. So a lot of what we do is developing relationships with donors and working with them to help us fund our activities. We have relationships that vary from year to year, such as sponsorship. So we might enter into a sponsorship arrangement with a company to effectively advertising services, so their name will be connected with one of our exhibitions, and that again is a very valuable source of income to us.
For the Museum of Fine Art, it's more or less something like, we will say 12 million, including the dotation, all the activities of the museum, and also the personal affair for the public, the people working in the museum. It represents only 60% of the budget of the museum. So the 40 others, it's coming directly from our economical business in the museum, the shops, the rental space, nocturnes, ticketing, and things like this. 60-40, it's really a good balance, and we are now more and more increasing our own profits, so we are more going to 60 own profits and 40 coming from the dotation. That's the way, and that's the objective of the museum. We have some sponsorship, but it's no more company giving money so every year to the museum. It's more focused on really special programs. We have some private supporting, by example, the publication of few magazines. We get money from special companies for diseased people, for educational program, but there is more or less no more sponsoring in the way for the exhibition.
O orçamento do museu, ele é definido, compartilhado, vamos dizer assim, com todos os outros museus vinculados à Secretaria de Cultura. Como é o museu mais visitado, né, da Bahia, atualmente é o museu mais visitado da Bahia, e a gente tem uma quantidade de atividades, não só exposições, atividades de comunicação, mas principalmente atividades de acesso a ao patrimônio, quer dizer, a gente tem uma quantidade de atividades educativas, de arte e educação e de mediação cultural enorme. A gente tem provavelmente uma quantidade maior de verba disponível entre essa verba direcionada aos museus. A gente tem em torno de 600, 800 mil que são utilizados nas diversas áreas do museu. A gente tem, claro, uma necessidade de focar muito no setor de comunicação, que seriam as exposições, que seriam as atividades, as exposições mesmo, né? A mostra do acervo do museu ou de artistas dos museus. A gente tem que distribuir essa verba também para a estrutura, né, da museologia, do restauro, e principalmente que justamente acho que o destaque do MAN é justamente essas atividades de arte e educação. São essas atividades que promovem a aproximação do público com o patrimônio, com o acervo, com a arte contemporânea.
I believe it's a good idea if you have a budget of about 3 million euros to work with every year. I think I'm in favor of that, not to say that 10% has to go to communication, 20% goes to public services, 40% goes to temporary exhibitions. We are not in favor of doing that. I believe, for example, if we have an exhibition, then we try to find out how big and how important is this exhibition in terms of public audiences. And when it's an exhibition that we think it deserves a good international communication, then we have to spend more money in communication and marketing, but also more money in research and more money in, for example, in presentation. So it depends a little bit. But we believe that, for example, on marketing and communication, we believe that about 20% has to go from the global budget has to go to marketing and communication. So it's about 1/5 of the budget. And apart from that, we have the salaries, the research for preparing exhibitions, the presentations, for example. This is a museum where we took from the immediate beginning, we made the choice that we want to recreate new presentations every time. But this has a result on the budget and working with the budget in terms of having a budget which is flexible and creating the possibility to work with a good budget for new presentations, for good public services, for good research and so on.
The museum is with directions. There is one first direction, it's the conservation, and then a part of the budget is for new acquisition and restoration of the collection. From a while, we have to cut in the budget, and it's there that we cut. And first, in the acquisition. Why first the acquisition? Because it makes no sense to acquire new works and to stay with the other one without any kind of restoration and conservative aspect. So the priority is to conserve, and then if we get some more extra, we could buy something. That's the first department with the conservation. In this department, there is also all the scientific research that costs a lot, so we have to pay for this too, but it's this department. The second one is the relationship with the public. And the public sector is based on another logic, because in the first department, we pay, but we don't get money for this. The relationship with the public is something really different, because the people are coming to the museum, they pay for a ticket, they pay for a service, they pay for a visit, for something like this. There is balance between both. There is no museum in the world where you come and you pay what's the real cost of the museum to visit it. It's not really a balance. There is a global price for a museum. Here it's more or less between 8 and 10 euros between the collection and the exhibition. When you are taking a look, you are going to the theater to see a movie, it's more or less the same price. It's a logical price, but it's not the price of the visit, because the real price of the visit is the cost of 1 year of the museum spread on the number, how many visitors are coming, and you know exactly what's the cost. It's incredible. It's more or less, we are more or less 200 euros per visitor. We will never ask that to the visitors to pay 200 euros to visit because it's the real cost. Then, with the second department, we have a balance. We try to do a lot of things. People are paying for doing that, and we try to find a balance between what we get as money and what we have to pay for this. And that explains that the shops, we are not interested with shops if shop is losing money. The money from the shop, we get, I will say, 500,000 benefits in the shop per year. Okay, we take this money and we will give some to the educational program, some to the social program, and so they could manage their activity with this money. They organize also charity events and things like this, and so we manage the balance there. The third department is the department of the administration, and then that's the huge part of the budget. It's the cost of people working in the museum, and it's always increasing. The problem of the public administration of the museum is that we are working with an envelope. The federal state gives us the same amount every year. It's cutting more and more, but people are more and more expensive. They are older, we have to pay more, and that's the real problem. Today, you get money for 10 people. 10 years later, you just have, with the same amount, enough money to pay 3 or 4. But with 3 or 4, it's not enough to work with the museum. So we have more and more to manage the difference of this and to work like a private company. That's a real problem, because people in the street, in the papers and such, reaction of the public, they don't understand that, because they said, it's public, it's the state pay for a service, and we come and we get the service. But we are more and more involved with a private logic.
One of our biggest costs, of course, is our staff, and that doesn't change significantly from year to year, other than through the usual turnover of staff. You tend to keep a similar amount each year. So staff costs stay pretty much constant. Other operating costs, providing security, providing maintenance of the building is a very big cost for us, because it's a huge Grade 1 listed building. So making sure that it is safe, it meets health and safety requirements, and we can open it to the public is a constant fixed cost. So, and I think this is a problem, or it's an issue in budgeting for museums, probably right across the world, that your primary duty is to conserve your collection for the very long term, and that carries with it a very high burden of fixed costs that you can't avoid. So you have to put that first, and you have to make sure that you've accounted for that before you then go on to do more discretionary programs, such as education programs, or improving access, or renovating rooms, or whatever. Your primary duty is the security and preservation of the collection, so that comes first. But in terms of how things fluctuate, I mean, the biggest cost that changes from year to year is our exhibitions program, and that will vary depending on the nature of the exhibitions that are planned. So a major international loan show can involve very high costs if pictures are coming in from, say, from America, from Brazil, from Japan. If pictures are coming from a long distance, and there are a lot of them, then they will be expensive. Conversely, if we hold an exhibition of largely UK-based works, or works from our own collection, then the cost will be very much lower. So the exhibitions program is planned a number of years in advance, and we'll use that programming in order to then budget accordingly.
A maneira que a gente tem de tentar agilizar essa captação de recursos, agilizar essas soluções, né, de captação de recursos, é criar uma pessoa jurídica, que no caso do museu seria a Associação de Amigos do Museu. O que vai acontecer vai ser a criação de uma diretoria, quer dizer, ou de uma presidência, de uma diretoria dessa associação, que vai captar e gerir recursos para a realização de atividades do museu. A captação vai ser feita com empresas e pessoas físicas interessadas em colaborar com a cultura e em participar das atividades que o museu promove. Então a gente tem uma quantidade de oficinas, a gente tem uma quantidade de palestras, mesas redondas, a gente tem um café aqui que não é uma gestão nossa, mas que é um parceiro e a pessoa que for amigo do museu vai ter prioridades e vantagens no aproveitamento dessas atividades, né?
We also have established relationships with a number of corporate partners and supporters. So we have a corporate membership scheme, and those members will pay a membership fee each year, and that entitles them to entertain in the galleries, for example, periodically. And that gives us a sort of certain level of income year on year.
The Friends Association, there are different kinds of friends. Depends on how much you give as a membership. And with them we have a very close relationship because it's an association which is not part of the museum but next to the museum. And then you have also the great sponsors also, or people who donate or who give a leg. They give support by the volunteers, they give support in educational projects or public projects, but they give also help in achieving new artwork.
It's very important that we develop as many avenues whereby we can build self-generated income to support the museum's work. We have a really vibrant commercial department, business and commercial department, and they have a number of areas of activity. One of them, we do have a picture library, so we do digitise our collections and they are available for people to buy. But we also have a very, very wonderful retail range, which is based on our collections or our temporary exhibitions. And that forms a large part of our self-generated income. In addition to that, we also license product into a broader market. So we work with supermarkets and clothing chains and retail chains to promote Natural History Museum products to those retail organisations. So at Christmas time, you can walk into John Lewis, one of the big department stores in London, and find Natural History Museum remote-controlled mosquitoes and remote-controlled dinosaurs as a potential Christmas present.
And watch them cringe as you fly closer. A radio control handset directs your mosquito to huge heights with great stability. Charges from the handset too. Capture yours today.
So our business and commercial side is very vibrant for the museum.
There is no laws in Belgium supporting private initiative for public cultural matters like a museum. In 2006, the idea was to present a new project and to say, well, we have the Magritte Works, we have the place, we just need a support to realize a project, a small project, because it was not so expensive, it was more or less 7 million euros, it's not so much. And the idea was to get the money with big companies. And one of those companies said, no money, forget it. We have to invest with our money and we are not supporting for such a large amount cultural initiative. But if you come back with a list of, by example, the works that we could do for you, we will study that. And it was really interesting to see that except the painting on the building and the lift, everything was in the end of GDF Suez. At this time it was just Suez. So that was the first time that we organized that in this way. It was really enthusiastic also to be for the first time on this field, and also really complicated because there was no experience, there was no background. We had to initiate something really new.
In Antwerp it took more than 100 years before we picked up the idea to create a new museum, and as a consequence of that to build a new building for housing the museum. So what we try to do is to seduce companies and seduce private companies, but also seduce individuals to become partner of this new idea, create a new museum and create a new building. So it was more or less the idea of be part of it, because otherwise you will miss history. And that's a big challenge that creates a good perspective in terms of making people accomplished to the new creation of new building and so on. We were looking for 4 founders, 4 big companies, and each company had its own good motivations to become the founder of the museum. They all brought in about 800,000 euros to become founder of the museum. And I think in Flanders, in this Belgian community, it's for the first time that we found 11 million euros by private sponsorship. This is a lot of money, especially seen in terms of that there is no, so to speak, tradition in private sponsorship in museums. And apart from that, we were not only looking for the big companies, but we were also looking for individuals. And the idea, now it's known under the name of crowdfunding. How you can make a crowd, individuals, people like you and me, a group of girlfriends, a group of a small family, how we can make them accomplished and involve them in financing the museum. We did that by means of the hands against the facade, and the hands is the symbol of the city of Antwerp. And we have 3,000 hands against the facade, and everybody can adopt a hand. And everybody can say, well, this is my hand, and I made it possible by buying a hand for 1,000 euro, and 3,000 hands, 1,000 euros is 3 million euros by means of crowdfunding.
Como nós somos museu público, a nossa intenção é sempre fazer uma captação de recursos externos, né? Fazer captação de recursos e parcerias público-privadas, para a gente conseguir assim, ampliar as nossas atividades. Essas parcerias precisam acontecer entre pessoas jurídicas. E nós não somos pessoas jurídicas, nós somos uma direção, um órgão vinculado, uma direção vinculada ao IPAC. Quer dizer, a gente usa para fazer captação de recursos o CNPJ do IPAC. E isso nos atrapalha muito.
O que eu penso que é o mais difícil mesmo é a quantidade de verba que é destinada para a cultura aqui no país, né, no estado. Né. Eu penso que a Bahia é um estado que tem um potencial turístico enorme. Né. Se fala muito em turismo cultural, mas eu ainda vejo ações tímidas nesse sentido. É preciso que haja um aporte maior de verba também do Estado. Mas eu entendo também que esse aporte ele precisa vir também de fundos privados, né? Vir de outras fontes. Não vou somente colocar o Estado como responsável por isso, né? É preciso ainda, principalmente aqui na Bahia, é preciso que haja um entendimento maior também das empresas, né, de investidores, de entender que é também função deles, né, ou seja, de pessoas, de empresas privadas, né, de ajudarem, de auxiliarem também na manutenção de um programa cultural para o Estado.
I mean, I would say, just coming back to the issue of long-term planning and ensuring sustainability of funding over a period. I mean, we're very fortunate that we do have an element of secured funding from government, but that of course is diminishing over time. So the critical issue for us is to try and increase our privately generated income. So over time we will move to a more mixed economy where we are relying more on individuals and corporate sponsors and funders. And I think it's very important in that context to have a long-term strategy of how you're going to develop that over time. So for example, looking at the possibility of developing endowment funding, things where you can really build up funds that will ideally become self-sustaining over time. So I mean those are those are challenging, big issues to deal with, and you have to be thinking about them over the very long term. But for us, I think those are the key things, and then ensuring on the other side that your costs remain sustainable and justifiable over time.
I see that the challenge is to survive for a part. I think sponsorship will be less and less important, and what's more and more important, it's more the program with people themselves. Everyone could be a sponsor of the museum, sometime for a large amount, but it's more to build it with small amount, and we have to increase our public and to develop this aspect more than the relationship with big companies, because the big companies are also more interested now with the social aspect and the wealth policy than with the culture, because culture appears like something in the mood, yes, but it's for rich people, it's not really with a deep social access. I'm not agree with this. I'm sure that we are the base of an economy for Europe, really important, but in the global way of thinking, people are always in the position to think, well, culture is, if everything is okay, we could give money to the culture, but not if we are in a crisis. And in crisis, the first economy comes in the cultural field, always.
Pois é, o investimento em cultura não é uma prioridade, nem no Brasil, nem na Bélgica e muito menos na Inglaterra. Quando a crise econômica chega, o investimento em museus também fica mais escasso. E é por isso que gestores dessas instituições estão sempre buscando formas alternativas de captação de recurso para conseguir gerir a instituição de forma mais autônoma e menos dependente dos recursos patrocinados. E você, conhece alternativas de gestão econômica e financiamento? Conta pra gente, participe desse diálogo sobre gestão cultural. E não se esqueça de compartilhar esse conteúdo, afinal você não vai deixar os seus amigos de fora dessa conversa. No próximo episódio nós falamos sobre produção de exposições permanentes e temporárias. Eu te espero!